The geography of the Cold War. What was containment? It was a glorious meeting. On April 25th, 1945, at the Elbe River in Germany, two powerful armies met. Coming from opposite ends of Europe, the Americans and Russians had cut Hitler's Germany in two. Now at the Elbe, soldiers from the Red Army of the Soviet Union reached out their hands to their American counterparts. It was a time for great happiness. World War II, the deadliest war in all of human history, was nearly over. Unfortunately, the warmth of the handshakes did not last. The Soviet Union and the United States had some serious differences. Their greatest difference was over a political and economic system called communism. In its pure form, communism believed that private ownership should be replaced by community ownership. In the Soviet Union, this idea was not easily accepted by the people. Russian leaders Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin were ruthless in their elimination of those who had different ideas about Russia's future. It is estimated that in the 1930s, Stalin was responsible for killing more than 10 million Soviet people who he believed were in his way. Soviet communists did not like capitalism. They opposed private ownership economies of the United States and its allies. Russian leaders believed that capitalism was doomed and that communism would spread throughout the world. This caused great tension and the emergence of a new kind of war, a Cold War. Mistrust ran deep. In the words of Winston Churchill, it was as if an, quote, iron curtain had been drawn between the Soviet-controlled countries of Eastern Europe and the Western democracies. The Soviets had suffered terribly in World War II, losing more than 27 million soldiers and civilians. Stalin was determined that Germany would never be able to strike Russia again. To protect Russia, Stalin wanted a buffer zone in Eastern Europe, but he wanted more. It was no secret that Stalin and his successors wanted to expand the Soviet Empire. If the Soviet policy was expansion, then the American policy was containment. Containment was the idea that the Soviet Union and Soviet communism should not be allowed to spread. One example of containment was the Truman Doctrine. In 1947, President Harry Truman declared that the United States would support, quote, free peoples, like those in Greece and Turkey, who were being threatened by communists. The Truman Doctrine was followed by the Marshall Plan, which gave over $12 billion in aid to help rebuild European democracies, like France and West Germany. The idea was to give these countries resources so that communist ideas would not be so attractive. By 1947, the United States and the Soviet Union were clearly on a collision course. Stalin and his successors were always looking for weak spots to push and probe, to test American commitment to containment. This mini-Q features 3 occasions where the Soviets tested American containment policy. Your task is to examine the maps, then answer the question, the geography of the Cold War. What was containment?